Welcome everyone to the Slalom Supply Chain Fireside Chat. I'm your host Harshad Kanvinde, leader of Slalom's global supply chain practice. Today, my guest is Parimal Kopardekar. Parimal is director at NASA and principal investigator of Unmanned Aircraft System Traffic Management or UTM. We talk about resiliency of aerospace supply chain ecosystem, why is it important, and the role NASA plays in the ecosystem. Welcome everyone to the Fireside Chat with me. And today we have Parimal Kopardekar as our guest. Parimal is a director at NASA Aeronautics Research Institute. He's also inventor and principal investigator for Unmanned Aircraft System Traffic Management or UTM. Does a lot of other things. His work takes him in a variety of different directions. One of his interest and focus area is how to build resiliency and robustness in aerospace supply chain. So without further ado, I want to hand over to Parimal. And Parimal, why don't you give us a brief introduction and maybe explain your journey so far and what has brought you to this point here and your role in supply chain, what you do at NASA and so on.
Yeah, it's a very interesting journey for me. And, I came to United States in '89 after bachelor's in production engineering in India, and I wanted to do more of production engineering, manufacturing, production planning and control, which is another term for supply chain in some ways. But at the time, I couldn't find enough courses focused on manufacturing. Mostly it was writing programs to move machines rather than building machines and such. So I felt that I should redirect my energies. And I focused on modeling and simulation, human factors, and operations research type of courses. And that was a master's and same thing with PhD. And I was looking for a good dissertation topic. I actually came across a talk at one of the conferences in Cincinnati, which is where I was doing my PhD at the time after a master's at Buffalo. Uh, and I listened to this talk on air traffic management, how complex the traffic control and management system is, how many people are involved, how many aircraft, the types of equipment involved, and distributed nature of facilities and the importance for any country and safety aspects and efficiency for aviation at large. So that got me really thinking and excited about working on dissertation. And that's what I worked on my PhD dissertation, air traffic controls workload and the speech and such. And then I got a job in that area working for FAA contractor in Atlantic City. Then after I became a US citizen, I got a job with FAA. Then FAA sent me to NASA. We used to have a technology transfer program, NASA technology transferred to FAA. So I was working for FAA for a couple of years, and then NASA hired me on the. So that was sort of my journey. And then as I was working on NASA and FAA, for last 20 some years, I've been focused on improving the aviation system at large, increasing the capacity, reducing delays, increasing efficiency of aircraft and operations, bringing more automation into the system to support humans like air traffic controllers, pilots, dispatchers. I came across this drone idea and the drone traffic management need for drone traffic management. This was 2013. So I started pushing for a robust drone traffic management kind of a system and a construct, what we call unmanned aircraft system traffic management, UTM. So that got me further along the path of figuring out how to enable new entrants. So the new entrants now are drones, commercial space launches, balloons, then urban taxis or urban air vehicles now, as we migrate towards electric vertical takeoff and landing type operations. So all things that are new entrants, and how do I basically figure out how to accommodate them without disturbing the current manned aviation? So that was what I started to think about. In that journey, I realized that the drone industry, even though we started it, it wasn't very well supported from the perspective of manufacturing and supply chain because we didn't really have a big capacity. And As a result, I realized that, oh, maybe there is a wider problem here. So I started digging into the supply chain aspects of entire aviation, aeronautics, and aerospace and defense ecosystem. And then I realized, oh, there are a whole bunch of issues here that we need to look at it. And based on the history and the experience of challenges we have discovered in supply chain in the past or experienced in the past, how do we set up a better future ecosystem for entire aerospace and defense to maintain the momentum towards uh, economic interest. So as you can see, aerospace and defense is $908 billion industry. 400 some billion come from supply chain. 1.5 million jobs are in supply chain. So supply chain for aerospace and defense is very critical as it contributes. The total aerospace and defense industry contributes over $70 billion trade surplus. So that's a really important factor. And I started to look forward and say, what would a supply chain for entire ecosystem of these new entrants? Now, my background in aerospace operations and then supply chain combined together. So, how do I look like a future or envision a future that will enable these new operations, not just from scaling in the airspace and space traffic, but also from manufacturing, sustainability, and supply chain robustness. So that's how I kind of circuitous road, somewhat scenic road, came to realization that for scalability, not only we need airspace operations and we can scale them in the air, in the air, but also we need the back end manufacturing and supply chain that's robust. So
No, that's fascinating. I mean, your whole journey from India to now, and UTM, and then the overall robustness of aerospace supply chain. Really a great honor to have you, PK, here.
well, thank you, thank you, thank you.
So I remember, I think it was at the beginning of the pandemic, probably March 2020, April 2020, around that time frame we connected, and we were talking about one of the things that caught my attention. I think this whole idea of you're focusing on UTM, how to kind of incorporate that into the overall aerospace ecosystem, and you're going beyond that. And then one of the things that you're interested in, that the traditional supply base who supplies to the aerospace manufacturers, that's okay, that's one thing, and there are challenges in that space to begin with. But how do we incent non-traditional players who are maybe manufacturing and supplying for the automotive industry or some other industries? How do we incent them to start working with aerospace manufacturers? So tell us a little bit more about that. I mean, it's been 1.5 years since that point, almost 2 years. So what kind of
Yeah.
progress or what kind of things that you are unearthing as you go on that journey to incenting more players, non-traditional players, to play in aerospace?
Yeah, it's really interesting timing wise. Just before the COVID hit United States, this was February 2019. We did a workshop on supply chain related to advanced air mobility. So that was just completely accidental. And then COVID hit, and then after that, the supply chain became a sort of a household buzzword almost, because everybody experienced some level of supply chain related challenges, which was very interesting. But throughout that process, we basically started to look at how does aerospace supply chain work, particularly if you're a new entrant. So let's say you are doing new type of aircraft, electric vertical takeoff and landing, or some kind of drone or autonomous aircraft. You need to do rapid prototyping. You still don't have a certification yet, so you're experimenting a lot. At that point, your needs are different than the scalability. You are looking for suppliers that will give you motors or batteries or whatever have you in small quantities. And we realize that the access to the suppliers at that point is very important. Not all suppliers are interested in very low volume type of deliveries. So I used to get calls and say, well, where can we find someone who can give us over molding parts? So we realized that there is a gap of these small, medium-sized suppliers, and these new entrants who are just working on their designs, but they want to do rapid prototyping and changes to their designs and such. So we're building electronic exchange database that allows the small and medium companies to connect with the OEMs, original equipment manufacturers or designers, so they can get access. So that's the first part, which is the access. This is all pre-certification. Now, we, currently we are focused on advanced air mobility, and most of these vehicles are still in the medium to early, medium, and late stages. And some of them are even in the design stages, but some of them are moved farther along and they are on the certification pathway. So till they get the certification, they basically freeze their design and such. They need to keep iterating and they need to have access to the small, medium suppliers. So we are really interested in bringing more small and medium sized suppliers into aviation, aerospace, and defense ecosystem. I think it's one of the most rewarding parts of this journey is to bring in new businesses that haven't been traditionally looking at aerospace as their customer base, because we have the new entrants that are looking for smaller quantities, and we have lots of new entrants, which is another fascinating and exciting thing. And they all need support and they need suppliers, so that's a good thing. And this electronic portal that we are building is helping that. With that, we have a vibrant work group that we bring in suppliers and OEMs, and we discuss their OEMs needs and suppliers and how do we connect them. So we have been able to do that, which is really great and rewarding to see. So the second stage is after you get your certification of the aircraft, how do you make sure that we have a vibrant, robust supply chain? So there are a couple of examples where of that didn't happen, and partly attributed to the demise of some of these vehicles. So that we want to avoid. We want to make sure that the ecosystem of supply chain is ready to support that in a way that's going to be economical. So we had examples, in the form of Eclipse aircraft and such. They could not get the supply chain set up well enough that will, even though they had a certification. So we want to have a resilient supply chain. So grow the suppliers, make sure that we have multiple suppliers that can sustain and provide economically. So that's the second stage, which is the resiliency. And then once the business picks up, aircraft are getting delivered, then you worry about making sure that you have scalability. Not only you have access and resiliency, but you have scalability, maintainability. Now, what's fascinating about these drones and electric vertical takeoff and landing operations is they're going to be very much regional. So, why that is important is if you're operating Dallas or Los Angeles or Orlando, you're going to want to have your stock inventory of spare parts locally available, maintenance technicians locally available. You're not going to want to have that aircraft sitting there for days waiting for part to show up or waiting for maintenance technician to show up. So now bringing that forward and saying, how do we make sure that we have a supply chain that is authenticated, that is locally available, like the car industry. Like if you go to local garage, you can go there and they will type in and figure out there is a part available in couple of hours from their garage. Then the part gets basically delivered. We need similar system. However, aviation is very interesting. It has certification requirements, production certification for every part. It's got requirements. Those parts need to be authenticated. You can't just substitute a nut or bolt or fastener that you just find in Home Depot. So we need to make sure that these are authenticated and locally available and yet maintain its integrity from the perspective of aviation. So that opens another fascinating, actually, business opportunities for many companies as well as many entrepreneurs to say, how do I set up a ecosystem of supply chain wherever these vehicles are going to operate? I want to be there to support them. So again, summarize it. In the early stage, you're just looking for access to small, medium-sized suppliers. Then once you get certification, you want to have some resiliency so you can continue the momentum towards the aircraft manufacturing, and don't lose out because you don't have a good supply chain, resilient supply chain. And the last one is the scalability and maintainability. Those three things are fantastic to basically opportunities moving forward. And this really excites me to see that we can actually support the ecosystem growth this way.
There is a lot to unpack there, PK, and I think probably a long journey. We are just at the beginning of the journey. That wouldn't be a wrong statement. So let me ask you. I think there are a couple of questions I want to ask on that topic. But entrepreneurs,
Yes, yes,
let's talk about the entrepreneurs who are doing something. I mean, if you just think about the drone mobility and the electric vehicles, vertical takeoff, all those kind of things. Maybe talk about them, then combine all those in one category. Variety of different use cases that different industries are talking about. So retail, e-commerce is one, and your package delivery and so on. So what type of entrepreneurs are jumping into creating new drone companies or creating new aviation companies? And what characteristics do you see who are kind of getting it and persisting enough to take it to that next level beyond the initial tinkering? So I'm sure that you have had variety of interactions as in your job and in your day-to-day life. So what are you seeing? Who are succeeding? What kind of advice you want to give to the new entrepreneurs who want to jump in? As you said, tremendous opportunity, a lot of things to do, but not an easy industry to get in. So any advice and observations?
Yeah, so the two things that separate the aviation or aerospace and defense ecosystem as compared with some of the other new Silicon Valley type startups, which are software based. One is aerospace and defense requires both software and hardware and lots of people involvement. So that's really one key thing. As a result, and it has a certification requirement from regulators around the world. In our case, it's the Federal Aviation Administration in the United States. That means it's a long road. Aircraft certification could take 7 to 20 years, depending on the type of aircraft and the type of innovation and things like that. So, it's a long journey along that path, and sometimes you can accelerate those things based on what already is being done, and if you're leveraging previous certification type basis and things like that. But it's a long road, so that's one thing. Second is a capital intensive, and third, it's really important to understand the role of people, because it's the maintenance, it's the training pilots, or sometimes it's piloted aircraft, sometimes it's unpiloted or remotely piloted, but yet you need people to figure out how to train these things. It's not just plug and play when you roll that out, which requires a little bit more patience, capital, and a lot of passion about changing the world through aviation. And it does exist. I mean, really, if you think about it, the opportunity to change the way we will do transportation, and in fact, the way we will do living altogether is huge. If you can imagine that the flying cars, so to speak, or electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft that are quieter, can reach anywhere without having a need to have a airport, or you need to have a small patch of land called vertiport. That changes the dynamics. You don't really all don't need to go to central business district for work, because now you can put buildings, your businesses away from just city centers. Your homes don't need to be right next to highways or close to the highways, because you want to have access to transportation going into work. Uh, because these vehicles through air will fly anywhere. So you can geographically distribute and combine green spaces and buildings and uh, housing and businesses all in a much more distributed way. And then you won't be basically just confined to traveling to businesses, because that's where the road takes you. There are examples in Washington where the hotels had to relocate because nobody would work there because there wasn't easy access to transportation. Those things will not happen. Even though the location was really great for visitors and the guests of the hotel, it was quiet and all that. But people wouldn't work there because it was not easy to commute or go to work there. So that's the kind of stuff that will transform our society in the long run if we are successful in electric vertical takeoff and landing or aviation coming to you or drones for services and things. The society can transform. And I think that's the real power of aviation that we are excited about. And it does require an entire ecosystem. You need a charging station, you need a place to land, you need a way to basically support its any contingencies, including maintenance and all that. It could change the way a society will actually function in the future if we are successful in this journey of aviation. That my personal dream is to have aviation reach every zip code in some way, shape, or the form.
So I think a player like NASA and FAA plays a huge role in coordinating and boosting that ecosystem, as you're saying. So maybe changing gears a little bit. So entrepreneurs and this new area is one thing, but as we think about the robustness of the aviation supply chain, even when we focus on just the traditional players in the industry, that's far from being optimal, right? So that it has not reached to a point where and not only the pandemic showed us that, but even before the pandemic, I mean, those problems where everyone knew those. So as I mean, one thing could be your tier one and sub tier supply chain and having visibility and early warning available in that supply chain non-existent or barely existent, right? So as you think about the traditional players and also incenting them to kind of up their game and changing that ecosystem, is NASA or your organization playing any role there as you think about this broader ecosystem kind of challenges?
Yeah, certainly. I think what's interesting about that is the digitization and the digital networks and the progress that we are making in digitizing the entire aerospace and enterprise. Sometimes people use different terms, model-based system engineering, digital engineering, things like that. But the real focus is making sure that we have digital representation of the system. And that is actually a really critical piece that will enable us to change the way we do transactions and the way we will increase our resiliency. Currently, large original equipment manufacturers, they don't talk to all of their suppliers. They only talk to their tier ones, tier one, tier two, three, and on. So it's a layered system which has evolved because of the ease of communication that it brought before the digital days. Now we are in that digital era where I think we can transform the way the supply chain may look like, and we can say, let's have a complete network that's visible. You can imagine as executives sitting at the dashboard and looking at what's happening at multiple tiers in terms of the production, manufacturing rates, or any challenges. And if they uncover any challenges at certain tier, they can actually coordinate that rapidly uh, and say, okay, let's change this order from one supplier to another supplier because we are under deadline. And if you have a slack in the system, maybe that's all possible to continue the way it's going on. But if you wanted to make any changes, be more resilient, then you can do that. Or if there is a natural disaster striking some area, which has happened, in Japan after Fukushima
Right.
disaster, the ink industry kind of got seriously impacted, which impacted PCBs and PCWs, and it took a while to realize, oh wow, there is a problem here, But if we have that transparency across the entire supply chain and tracking through digital means, we will be able to change our processes very quickly in a real time practically. And that's what I'm really excited about, is to how do we actually make sure that the resiliency for that customer is maintained based on the visibility we have. Fundamentally, it will also change the lower tier suppliers, because lower tier suppliers are already scrambling. They don't really always have a lot of cash at hand, capital to modernize. So if there's one digital supply network they can join, it will simplify their operations as well. they will have access into multiple OEMs and their forecasts, so that if they want to buy thermoplastic, they can aggregate orders and buy in bulk rather than only one transaction at a time. So it actually up and down, it will simplify things, which is what I'm really excited about, particularly keep making sure that the lower tier suppliers have have ability to also support the OEMs and upper tiers in a rapid manner, as well as get the visibility into what's likely to happen in the future, so they can do aggregation much more efficiently. So it's a really exciting time. I think the digital ecosystem of supply chain network for aerospace and defense is just critical. And the other part of that is only authenticated suppliers can be there, so that
Like,
you will reduce the suspected unauthorized parts and things that somehow get into the system.
somehow build this trust in the system, like any
Right,
other
exactly.
marketplace type of business.
Yeah,
Obviously, the complexity are much larger and different here because of the certification and the regulation requirements and the safety requirements and so on. I think that you said it. So the technology has advanced over last several decades. I think the way we think about visibility, way we think about resiliency need to change and take advantage of that. And that's creating several opportunities for entrepreneurs as well, right? So if you think about the visibility in the supply base, there are several companies targeting that problem with some success somewhere. I mean, it's always going to be sporadic in the early stages, but hopefully, I think we are moving in the right direction. So we are excited about visibility and predictability and action. How do you get those insights? I mean, visibility in itself doesn't do anything unless you act on it. So there is an organizational piece there as well that need to, and the cultural aspect and the mindset aspect,
yeah, yeah.
but exciting times nevertheless. So let me take this opportunity, PK, because there is just so much to talk and we don't have enough time. But one last thing I wanted to touch before I let you go is you are a passionate educator. So in addition to your roles at NASA and the other things you're doing at UTM and the industry roles, you also teach. So over last couple of years, as you said, supply chain has become the household kind of topic and kitchen table conversation because of the pandemic. Good or bad, I think it's good overall for the industry. More people are getting interested into this challenge. More brains will come, and the challenges will be solved more faster. So as an educator, what you see or what you have seen in the last couple of years, are the attitudes of the students changing towards supply chain? Are the topics that they are interested in, are the motivations changing?
Yeah, so currently I'm teaching three courses: operations management, supply chain, and innovation at two different business schools. And in the past, before 2002, while we were on the East Coast, I also taught operations management, management science, statistics, quality management, and such. They all sort of related to making things efficient in general. Uh, and I see that there's an increased interest in operations management and supply chain. A lot of students say, well, I didn't even know that this subject actually existed and how useful that is to my job or moving forward. Um, Usually people think about, management, they don't always think about that there is a whole ecosystem that they need to think about. They are always looking at project management or product management and things like that. But the operations management, which is sort of more continuous basis for making sure there is good forecasting and there's good aggregation of planning and tracking and quality management and so on and so forth. Those things are not always obvious to students. A lot of students, when they take these courses, they get really excited. So, well, I'm glad that I took this course. I didn't even know this kind of field existed. So that's very rewarding to hear and rewarding to see that students getting opportunity to apply and these skills in their current jobs or new jobs when they apply. So that's what really excites me, to kind of giving that exposure about this whole field that exists in making things efficient in general. because these days it's not just your individual products or services compete, but it's the entire supply chain competes with other supply chains. So
Right.
the more efficient and more robust you are, the better it is that your business will flourish in terms of products and service. So that's what is really appealing to me, and it's exciting to see students get that realization. There's no joy better than that. That students realizing, oh, how cool is this that I didn't even know that existed. So
Yeah, PK, it was great to have you here. Thanks a lot for all your contributions to the field, and maybe there is a follow-up session we can do. We can do. There is just so much to talk.
absolutely, yeah.
The
Well,
field
there
is
is so
field
much to talk.
is exciting, but really great to have you here. We'll continue chatting, and hopefully, I think the silver lining of last 2 years of pandemic and all the problems that occurred because of that, the silver lining, maybe more people got excited, more fresh brains will start joining the supply chain and start solving the problem and look at it differently, and maybe something good comes out of that. So on that, let's end the discussion today, and we'll obviously continue chatting offline.
Well, thank you, Harshad, for inviting me. This is a great. It was a really pleasure talking to you about this.
Thank you. Bye.